In the warm silence of a Sunday morning, the packed church breathes as one, while the pastor speaks into the microphone. A large German shepherd lies next to the altar, eyes locked on the front pews. In the first row, a baby sleeps wrapped in a thick blanket, the mother's head bowed. Without warning, the dog stands, walks through the congregation, and grabs the edge of the fabric with his teeth. The microphone sound is cut by the noise of tearing cloth. The entire choir stops singing, watching in silence. The blanket unfolds and falls to the ground. A dark object emerges from the folds, glinting under the altar light. For a moment, no one breathes. Love stories with animals. Subscribe now so you won't miss any. Thanks for being with us. Now, back to our story. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Church, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the worn wooden pews. Millbrook Creek, Georgia, was the kind of small town where everyone knew everyone, and Sunday mornings brought the entire community together under one roof. The familiar scent of old wood and lingering incense filled the air as the congregation settled into their usual spots, greeting each other with warm smiles and gentle nods. Margaret Patterson adjusted her worn hymnal and glanced around the sanctuary, taking note of who was present and who was missing, as she had done every Sunday for the past 37 years. Dorothy Crane sat in her customary third row, left side, just as her late husband had preferred. The Johnson family filled their usual pew near the back, their 3 children fidgeting as always. Everything seemed perfectly normal until Margaret's eyes fell upon an unfamiliar figure in the second row. A young woman with auburn hair sat quietly, cradling what appeared to be a sleeping infant wrapped in a soft blue blanket. The stranger's clothes were simple but clean, suggesting she wasn't from the wealthy families that dominated Millbrook Creek's social circles. What caught Margaret's attention even more was the large German shepherd lying peacefully at the woman's feet, its dark eyes alert but calm. "Well, I never," Margaret whispered to her seatmate, glancing toward the unexpected visitors. Dogs weren't exactly forbidden in St. Matthew's, but in all her years of attendance, she couldn't remember ever seeing one during service. Father Thomas emerged from the vestry, his kind eyes immediately noticing the newcomers. He had served this community for over a decade, and while he recognized most faces instantly, this young mother was definitely a stranger. As he approached the pulpit, he offered a gentle smile in her direction, hoping to make her feel welcome despite the curious stares she was undoubtedly receiving. "Good morning, beloved congregation," Father Thomas began, his voice carrying the warmth that had endeared him to his flock. "Before we begin today's service, I'd like to welcome any visitors who have joined us this beautiful Sunday morning." The young woman looked up briefly, offering a shy smile, before returning her attention to the bundle in her arms. The German shepherd remained perfectly still, though its ears twitched slightly at the sound of Father Thomas's voice. As the service progressed through the opening hymns and readings, the atmosphere remained peaceful. The baby appeared to be sleeping soundly, and the dog showed remarkable discipline, lying quietly without disturbing anyone. However, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this particular Sunday, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. During the gospel reading, young Timothy Walsh, one of the altar servers, found himself distracted by the magnificent dog. He'd always wanted a German shepherd, and this one was particularly beautiful, with a thick coat and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around them. The dog's name tag caught a glimmer of light. Rex. Timothy read silently from his position near the altar. Sarah Mitchell, though none in the congregation knew her name yet, held her 6-month-old daughter, Emma, close to her chest. She had been traveling for weeks, searching for a place where she and her baby could start fresh, away from the complications that had driven them from their hometown in North Carolina. Millbrook Creek had appeared like an answer to her prayers when her car had broken down just outside the town limits 3 days ago. The local mechanic, A kind man named Joe Stevens had offered to let her stay in the small apartment above his garage while he ordered the necessary parts for her aging sedan. Sarah had been grateful for his generosity, especially since her savings were running dangerously low. She had hoped that attending Sunday service might help her feel more connected to this potential new home. Rex, her faithful companion since she was a teenager, had been her constant protector throughout their journey. The dog had belonged to her late grandfather, a former police officer who had trained Rex to be both a loyal pet and a guardian. When her grandfather passed away 2 years ago, Rex had naturally gravitated towards Sarah, seeming to understand that she needed protection and companionship. As Father Thomas began his homily about finding refuge in faith during times of uncertainty, Sarah felt a strange comfort in his words. It was as if he was speaking directly to her situation. Though she knew that was impossible, she shifted Emma to a more comfortable position, careful not to disturb her daughter's peaceful sleep. The congregation listened attentively to Father Thomas's sermon, the familiar rhythm of his voice providing comfort to the assembled faithful. However, about 15 minutes into the homily, Rex began to show the first signs of restlessness. His ears perked up, and he lifted his head slightly, his nose twitching as if he detected something that troubled him. Sarah noticed her dog's change in demeanor immediately. Rex had always been sensitive to his surroundings, but this level of alertness was unusual for him during quiet moments. She gently placed her free hand on his head, whispering softly, "Easy, boy. It's okay." But Rex's unease only seemed to intensify. He began to focus intently on the blue blanket that wrapped Emma, his dark eyes fixed on something that no one else could see. A low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his throat, causing Sarah to furrow her brow with concern. Margaret Patterson, always alert to any disruption in the service, noticed the dog's behavior immediately. She watched with growing curiosity as Rex became increasingly agitated, though he remained remarkably controlled. The dog's training was evident in the way he managed his distress without causing an obvious scene. Other members of the congregation began to take notice as well. Dorothy Crane turned slightly in her pew, her eyebrows raised with interest. The Johnson children, delighted by the presence of a dog, had been sneaking glances throughout the service, and they were among the first to notice Rex's changing behavior. Father Thomas, experienced in managing various disruptions during his years of service, continued his homily while keeping a watchful eye on the situation. He could see that the young mother was trying to calm her dog, and he appreciated her efforts to minimize any disturbance to the service. Sarah felt her cheeks warming with embarrassment as she realized that Rex's behavior was drawing attention. She had hoped their first appearance at St. Matthew's would be unremarkable, allowing them to blend in quietly while she determined whether Millbrook Creek might become their new home. Instead, she found herself becoming the center of unwanted attention. Rex's focus on the baby's blanket intensified, and he began to nudge gently at the blue fabric with his nose. Sarah initially interpreted this as simple curiosity or perhaps a touch of jealousy, as Rex had needed time to adjust to sharing her attention with baby Emma. She quietly tried to redirect his attention away from the infant. "Rex, no," she whispered as softly as possible, hoping not to disturb the other worshippers, but the dog's behavior only became more insistent. He began to paw gently at the edge of the blanket, his movements careful but determined. The tension in Rex's body language was unmistakable to Sarah, who had lived with him long enough to read his every mood and signal. This wasn't jealousy or simple restlessness. This was the same alertness he displayed when he sensed danger, the same focused intensity that had made him such an effective guardian throughout her life. As the homily continued, the mysterious behavior of the German Shepherd created an undercurrent of curiosity and concern among the congregation. Some dismissed it as normal animal behavior, while others began to sense that something unusual was unfolding in their peaceful Sunday service. The peaceful atmosphere of St. Matthew's Church began to shift as Rex's restlessness grew more pronounced. What had started as subtle alertness was now evolving into something that made Sarah's heart race with concern. The German Shepherd's intense focus on Emma's blanket was unlike anything she had witnessed before, and his usually impeccable behavior during quiet moments was deteriorating rapidly. Father Thomas, noticing the increasing distraction, attempted to maintain the flow of his homily while keeping a pastoral eye on the situation. His sermon about finding strength in community seemed particularly relevant now, as he could sense the congregation's attention dividing between his words and the unfolding drama in the second row. When we face uncertainty, Father Thomas continued, his voice steady and reassuring, we must remember that we are never truly alone. Sometimes protection comes from the most unexpected sources. As if responding to these words, Rex's behavior became more assertive. The dog began to paw more insistently at the blue blanket, his movements careful but increasingly urgent. Sarah tried once again to redirect his attention, but Rex seemed completely focused on something beneath the soft fabric that wrapped her sleeping daughter. Margaret Patterson leaned forward slightly, her curiosity now thoroughly piqued. In all her years of church attendance, she had never witnessed anything quite like this. The dog's behavior suggested intelligence and purpose rather than simple misbehavior, and she found herself wondering what could possibly be causing such focused concern. Dorothy Crane, sitting nearby, whispered to her companion, "That dog seems to know something we don't." Her observation carried further than intended, reaching several other members of the congregation who began to pay closer attention to the unfolding situation. Sarah felt the weight of multiple gazes upon her and wished desperately that she could simply disappear. This was not how she had envisioned her first impression on this close-knit community. She had hoped to slip quietly into their midst, perhaps finding the fresh start she so desperately needed for herself and Emma. Instead, she was becoming the center of an increasingly uncomfortable spectacle. Rex's low growling became slightly more audible, though he maintained remarkable control given his obvious distress. The sound sent a chill through Sarah, who recognized it as the warning signal he typically reserved for genuine threats. But what possible threat could exist in this peaceful church sanctuary on a quiet Sunday morning? Young Timothy Walsh, still positioned near the altar, found himself completely captivated by the drama unfolding before him. The German Shepherd's behavior reminded him of stories his grandfather had told about police dogs and their ability to detect dangers that humans couldn't perceive. There was something almost supernatural about the way Rex seemed to sense something wrong. The baby, Emma, stirred slightly in her mother's arms but remained largely undisturbed by the growing tension around her. Her peaceful sleep seemed almost angelic, in contrast to the increasing anxiety that Rex's behavior was generating among the congregation. Sarah adjusted her hold on her daughter, unconsciously moving her slightly away from the area where Rex's attention was so intensely focused. Father Thomas noticed the subtle movement and began to wonder if there might be more to this situation than simple animal restlessness. His years of pastoral experience had taught him to pay attention to seemingly minor details that might indicate larger concerns. The young mother's protective instincts seemed to be awakening in response to her dog's warnings. As the homily continued, Rex's behavior escalated to a new level. The dog began to use his teeth to gently grip the edge of the blue blanket, tugging with increasing insistence. This action caused several members of the congregation to gasp audibly, breaking the reverent silence that typically characterized their Sunday services. "Oh my!" Margaret Patterson exclaimed in a whisper that carried further than she intended. The sight of the large dog seemingly trying to pull the blanket away from the infant was both fascinating and alarming. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest as Rex's actions became impossible to ignore or excuse. She tried to maintain her composure while firmly commanding her dog to stop, but Rex seemed completely deaf to her instructions. His focus remained unwavering, his determination growing stronger with each passing moment. The tension in the sanctuary was now palpable. Members of the congregation found themselves torn between respect for the ongoing service and concern for what appeared to be an increasingly volatile situation. Some began to shift uncomfortably in their pews, while others leaned forward with curiosity and growing alarm. Father Thomas made the difficult decision to pause his homily, recognizing that the congregation's attention was no longer focused on his words. "Perhaps," he suggested gently, "our young visitor might like to step outside for a moment to tend to her companion's needs." Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment and gratitude for Father Thomas's diplomatic suggestion. She began to rise from her pew, intending to remove herself and Rex from the sanctuary before they caused any further disruption. However, as she stood, Rex's behavior became even more urgent and alarming. The German Shepherd suddenly lunged forward, managing to grab a larger portion of the blue blanket in his teeth. His action was swift and decisive, causing the fabric to shift dramatically around the sleeping baby. Several women in the congregation cried out in concern, fearing that the dog might inadvertently harm the infant. But instead of causing harm, Rex's action revealed something that made Sarah's blood run cold. A subtle movement beneath the remaining portion of the blanket caught her eye, something that definitely wasn't caused by her peacefully sleeping daughter. The movement was too smooth, too continuous, too purposeful to be anything an infant might produce. "What in heaven's name?" Dorothy Crane whispered, her voice carrying a note of genuine fear as she too noticed the strange movement beneath the fabric. Sarah's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive as she realized that Rex's behavior hadn't been random or misbehaving at all. Her faithful companion had been trying to warn her about something genuinely dangerous that had somehow found its way into her daughter's blanket. The thought sent waves of terror through her body as she contemplated what might have happened if Rex hadn't been there to alert them. Father Thomas stepped down from the pulpit, his pastoral instincts overriding concerns about disrupting the service. He could see the genuine fear in the young mother's eyes and sensed that this situation had moved far beyond simple animal misbehavior into something potentially serious. The congregation held its collective breath as Rex continued his urgent attempts to remove the blanket completely. His actions were becoming more determined, and his low growling had evolved into something that sounded almost like a warning bark, though he maintained enough control to keep the sound relatively subdued. Margaret Patterson found herself standing without consciously deciding to do so, her concern for the baby overriding her usual adherence to church etiquette. Other members of the congregation began to follow suit, creating a growing circle of worried observers around the young mother and her increasingly agitated dog. Sarah's hands trembled as she tried to process what was happening. The movement beneath the blanket continued, confirming her worst fears that something alive and potentially dangerous had somehow made its way into her daughter's bedding. The thought of what could have happened if they had been alone, without Rex's protective instincts, made her feel weak with terror. "Everyone please remain calm," Father Thomas instructed, though his own voice carried undertones of concern. He approached the second row carefully, unsure of what they might be dealing with, but determined to help resolve the situation safely. Rex's determination reached a crescendo as he managed to grip a substantial portion of the blue blanket. With one powerful tug, he pulled the fabric away from the baby, revealing what had been hidden beneath its soft folds. The collective gasp that rose from the congregation echoed through the sanctuary as the truth of Rex's warnings finally became clear to everyone present. The blue blanket fell away completely, and the horrifying truth that Rex had been desperately trying to communicate finally revealed itself to the stunned congregation of St. Matthew's Church. Coiled dangerously close to baby Emma, Its scales, gleaming in the filtered sunlight from the stained glass windows, was a copperhead snake, its distinctive copper-colored bands unmistakable to anyone familiar with Georgia's venomous wildlife. The collective scream that erupted from the congregation shattered the morning's peaceful atmosphere like glass. Margaret Patterson stumbled backward, her hymnal clattering to the floor as she grabbed onto the pew for support. Dorothy Crane covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. Throughout the sanctuary, people scrambled away from the second row, creating a chaotic scene of panic and confusion. "Dear Lord in heaven," Father Thomas exclaimed, his usual composure momentarily shaken by the sight of the deadly serpent so close to the innocent child. His years of pastoral training had prepared him for many crises, but nothing quite like this. Sarah's maternal instincts exploded into action. Without thinking, she jerked Emma away from the snake, clutching her daughter protectively against her chest. The baby, startled awake by the sudden movement and surrounding chaos, began to cry loudly, her wails adding to the cacophony of frightened voices echoing through the church. Rex, having successfully alerted everyone to the danger, positioned himself between the snake and Sarah. The German Shepherd's training kicked in as he faced the coiled serpent, his body tense and ready for action. The copperhead, disturbed from whatever hiding place it had found within the blanket's folds, raised its head defensively, its forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "Nobody move," shouted Joe Stevens, the mechanic who had been helping Sarah, as he rose from his seat near the back of the church. His voice carried the authority of someone who had dealt with dangerous wildlife before. "Copperheads strike when they feel threatened. Everyone stay very still." But the advice came too late for some. Mrs. Johnson, terrified for her own children's safety, had already begun herding them toward the exit, her movements quick and panicked. Her action triggered a domino effect as other families with young children began to follow suit, creating a bottleneck near the church's main entrance. The snake, agitated by the sudden movement and noise, began to slither away from its exposed position. Its movement was fluid and purposeful as it sought escape from the chaos it had inadvertently caused. Rex followed its progress with intense focus, ready to intercept if the serpent moved toward any of the fleeing congregation members. "How did that thing get in here?" demanded Charles Morrison, one of the church's longtime deacons, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and outrage. "And snakes don't just crawl into baby blankets by accident." His observation sent a chill through those who heard it above the continuing chaos. The implication was disturbing and created an immediate shift in the atmosphere, from simple fear to something much darker and more sinister. Sarah, still holding her crying daughter, found herself at the center of suspicious glances. Several members of the congregation were looking at her with expressions that ranged from confusion to outright accusation. The realization that people might think she had something to do with the snake's presence made her feel sick with dread. "This is no coincidence," Margaret Patterson announced loudly, her fear now mixing with anger. "Someone put that snake there deliberately. The question is who and why." Father Thomas, recognizing the dangerous turn in the congregation's mood, stepped forward with his hands raised in a calming gesture. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he urged. "Right now, our priority should be ensuring everyone's safety and getting that snake removed from the sanctuary." But his reasonable words were largely lost in the growing murmur of suspicious whispers. Dorothy Crane was already sharing her theory with anyone who would listen. "She's a stranger. We don't know anything about her. Maybe she brought that snake here herself." The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She looked around desperately for a friendly face, someone who might defend her against the growing suspicion, but found only wary stares and fearful expressions. The warm welcome she had hoped to find in Millbrook Creek was evaporating before her eyes. Rex, still focused on the snake's location, let out a sharp bark as the copperhead attempted to slither toward the altar area. The dog's warning caused several people near the front of the church to scramble backward, creating another wave of panic and confusion. Young Timothy Walsh, despite his fear, found himself fascinated by Rex's behavior. The dog was clearly protecting everyone in the church, not just his owner and the baby. His actions suggested training and intelligence that went beyond ordinary pet behavior. "Ah, that dog saved all of us," Timothy said loudly enough for those around him to hear. "If he hadn't warned us, that snake could have bitten the baby or any of us." His observation provided a momentary pause in the growing accusations against Sarah. Several people turned to look at Rex with new appreciation, recognizing the truth in the young man's words. The German Shepherd had indeed been a hero in this terrifying situation. Joe Stevens, taking advantage of the brief lull in panic, moved carefully toward the altar area where the copperhead had taken refuge. "I need something to contain this snake," he called out. "A box, a trash can, anything with a lid." Father Thomas hurried to the vestry, returning quickly with a large wicker basket that was typically used for collecting donations. "Will this work?" he asked, offering the container to Joe. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself surrounded by a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Some congregation members seemed to accept that the snake's presence was simply a bizarre accident, while others clearly believed there was more to the story than she was revealing. William Blackwood, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the church, finally stood and made his way toward the front. As one of Millbrook Creek's most influential residents and a major contributor to St. Matthew's Church, his opinion carried significant weight in the community. His expression was stern and uncompromising as he approached Sarah. "Young lady," William said in a voice that commanded attention, "I think you owe this congregation an explanation. Snakes don't just appear in baby blankets without some kind of human intervention." Sarah felt her face burning with embarrassment and fear. "I don't know how it got there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this. I would never put my own daughter in danger." Her protestations seemed to fall on deaf ears as more suspicious murmurs rippled through the crowd. The fact that she was a stranger in a close-knit community made her an easy target for blame and suspicion. Rex, having kept the snake contained near the altar, allowed Joe Stevens to carefully capture the copperhead using the wicker basket and a long wooden pointer that Father Thomas had retrieved from his office. The successful containment of the serpent brought a collective sigh of relief from the congregation. But it did little to ease the growing tension surrounding Sarah's presence. "We need to call the sheriff," William Blackwood announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions for the community. "This incident needs to be properly investigated." The suggestion sent another wave of fear through Sarah. The last thing she needed was official scrutiny of her presence in Millbrook Creek. She had come here seeking a fresh start, a place where she and Emma could build a new life away from the complications that had driven them from North Carolina. Now she found herself potentially facing accusations and investigations that could ruin any chance of finding peace in this small town. Father Thomas, sensing Sarah's distress, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to calm down before making any hasty decisions," he suggested diplomatically. "This has been a frightening experience for everyone, but let's not let fear drive us to unfair conclusions." His intervention provided Sarah with a small measure of comfort, but she could see that the damage to her reputation in the community might already be irreparable. The suspicious glances and whispered conversations continued around her, making it clear that many people had already made up their minds about her guilt or innocence. As Joe Stevens carefully carried the contained snake toward the church exit, Rex finally relaxed his guard stance. The German Shepherd trotted back to Sarah's side, pressing against her legs in a gesture of comfort and protection. His loyalty and bravery in the face of danger had not gone unnoticed by those present, and several people were beginning to view him as the hero of the morning's terrifying events. The remainder of Sunday passed like a nightmare for Sarah Mitchell. After the church service was abruptly ended due to the snake incident, she found herself the subject of intense scrutiny and whispered conversations throughout Millbrook Creek. Every trip to the small grocery store or walk with Emma brought curious stares and hushed discussions that ceased abruptly when she approached. By Monday morning, the story had spread throughout the entire town with the speed that only small community gossip could achieve. At Fletcher's Diner, the unofficial headquarters for local news and speculation, the snake incident had become the primary topic of conversation among the morning coffee crowd. "I'm telling you, Martha, something's not right about that woman," insisted Beverly Cross, the town's self-appointed social coordinator, as she stirred sugar into her coffee with unnecessary vigor. "Strangers don't just show up in our town with venomous snakes in their baby blankets. There's more to this story than she's letting on." Martha Hendricks, who ran the local bed and breakfast, nodded thoughtfully. "Joe Stevens told my husband that she's been staying above his garage since Thursday, said her car broke down, but who's to say that's really true? Maybe she came here deliberately for some reason we don't understand yet." The speculation grew more elaborate with each retelling. Some suggested that Sarah might be involved with insurance fraud, planning to claim her baby had been bitten. Others whispered about possible connections to rival churches in neighboring towns, though no one could articulate exactly what that might involve. Meanwhile, Sarah remained largely unaware of the extent of the gossip swirling around her. She spent most of Monday in the small apartment above Joe's garage, caring for Emma and trying to process the traumatic events of the previous day. Rex stayed close to her side, seeming to sense her distress and providing the comfort of his unwavering loyalty. The first concrete sign of the community's growing hostility came Tuesday morning when Sarah discovered a handwritten note that had been slipped under her door during the night. The message was brief but chilling. "Your kind isn't welcome here. Leave while you can." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the anonymous threat. The implication was clear, though she couldn't understand what her kind meant or why anyone would want to drive her away from Millbrook Creek. She had done nothing wrong, and the snake incident had been as much a shock to her as to anyone else in the congregation. Rex seemed to sense her distress and nuzzled against her legs, offering wordless comfort. The German Shepherd had been restless since Sunday, occasionally growling at sounds outside that Sarah couldn't detect. His heightened alertness suggested that he too sensed the growing hostility in their environment. Wednesday brought a visit from Sheriff Bob Martinez, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who seemed genuinely concerned about getting to the truth of the matter. Sarah invited him into the small apartment, grateful for the opportunity to tell her side of the story to someone in authority. "Miss Mitchell," Sheriff Martinez began, settling into the small kitchen chair. "I'm sure you understand that Sunday's incident has caused quite a stir in our community. I need to ask you some questions about how that snake might have gotten into your baby's blanket." Sarah appreciated his respectful tone and direct approach. "Sheriff, I've been asking myself the same question since it happened. I honestly have no idea how that snake got there. I checked Emma's blanket when I wrapped her before church, and there was definitely nothing unusual about it then. Where did you spend Saturday night?" the sheriff asked, pulling out a small notebook. "Right here, in this apartment. Joe Stevens can verify that. Emma was fussy with teething, so I was up with her most of the night. I would have noticed if anything had gotten into her blanket." Sheriff Martinez nodded, making notes. "What about Sunday morning? Did you stop anywhere before church?" Sarah thought carefully. "I walked straight from here to the church. It's only about 4 blocks, and Rex was with me the whole time. He would have alerted me if there had been any kind of animal nearby." The sheriff's next question surprised her. "Miss Mitchell, do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to cause you trouble or frighten you?" The question hit closer to home than Sarah was comfortable admitting. And not exactly enemies, she said carefully. There are some people in North Carolina who weren't happy when I left, but I can't imagine any of them following me here or going to such extremes. What kind of people? Sheriff Martinez pressed gently. Sarah hesitated, then decided that honesty was her best option. My ex-husband's family. They weren't pleased when I left town with Emma. They felt I should have stayed and worked things out, but the marriage was over, and I needed a fresh start. Did they ever threaten you? Not directly, but they made it clear they disapproved of my decision. My former mother-in-law said some harsh things about my ability to care for Emma on my own. Sheriff Martinez made more notes, then looked up with a thoughtful expression. Miss Mitchell, I have to ask this directly. Is there any possibility that someone from your past might have followed you here and planted that snake as a way to discredit you or put you in danger? The suggestion sent a chill through Sarah. She had fled North Carolina partly to escape the judgment and pressure from her ex-husband's influential family, but she had never imagined they might actually pursue her. I suppose it's possible, she admitted reluctantly, but it seems so extreme, so dangerous. They would never risk harming Emma. People do extreme things when they feel their family honor or interests are threatened, the sheriff observed. I'll need the contact information for your ex-husband and his family, just so I can rule them out as suspects. After Sheriff Martinez left, Sarah found herself looking at Millbrook Creek with new eyes. The charming small town that had seemed like a potential haven now felt potentially hostile and dangerous. The idea that someone might have deliberately planted the snake to frighten or discredit her was terrifying, especially since it suggested that whoever was responsible might try again. That afternoon, she decided to venture out for groceries, hoping that a normal activity might help restore some sense of normalcy to her situation. However, the trip to Morrison's Market proved to be another exercise in uncomfortable scrutiny. The store fell silent when she entered with Emma in her arms and Rex at her side. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, and several customers found sudden interest in products they clearly didn't need. Sarah tried to ignore the attention and focus on selecting the items she needed, but the hostile atmosphere was impossible to ignore. At the checkout counter, teenage clerk Susan Morrison, who was Charles Morrison's granddaughter, couldn't hide her curiosity. "Is it true that you brought a snake to church?" she asked with the bluntness of youth. "I didn't bring anything to church except my baby and my dog," Sarah replied firmly. "The snake was as much a surprise to me as it was to everyone else." Susan's eyes widened with interest. "My grandfather says snakes don't just appear in baby blankets by themselves. He thinks someone put it there on purpose." The suggestion that the incident might have been deliberate was becoming a common theme in the community's discussions, Sarah realized. "If someone did put it there," she said carefully, "it wasn't me. I would never endanger my own daughter." "But you're the only stranger in town," Susan pointed out with teenage logic. "Everyone else has lived here for years. Why would any of them want to put a snake in a baby blanket?" The question hung in the air as Sarah completed her purchase and left the store. Why indeed would a long-time resident of Millbrook Creek want to plant a dangerous snake in a baby's blanket? The answer might be more disturbing than the community was ready to consider. That evening, as Sarah prepared Emma for bed, she noticed Rex pacing restlessly near the apartment's single window. The dog's behavior reminded her of his alertness on Sunday morning, and she began to wonder if his instincts were detecting something that her human senses couldn't perceive. "What is it, boy?" she asked softly, approaching the window to peer out into the gathering darkness. The street below appeared normal, with porch lights beginning to flicker on in the approaching dusk. But Rex's continued agitation suggested that something was amiss, something that only his highly trained senses could detect. As she watched, a figure emerged from the shadows near the church across the street. The person moved carefully, deliberately, staying close to the buildings and avoiding the circles of light cast by the street lamps. Sarah couldn't make out any identifying features, but something about the furtive movement made her pulse quicken with anxiety. Rex's low growl confirmed her suspicion that the figure represented some kind of threat or concern. The dog's protective instincts were clearly activated, and his focus remained fixed on the mysterious person until they disappeared completely into the darkness. Thursday morning brought an unexpected visitor to Sarah's temporary home above Joe Stevens' garage. William Blackwood arrived in his pristine black Cadillac, the same vehicle he used to make his rounds through Millbrook Creek, ensuring that his various business interests were running smoothly and that his influence in the community remained unchallenged. Sarah answered the knock on her door to find the distinguished older man standing on the narrow staircase, his silver hair perfectly styled and his expensive suit impeccable despite the early hour. His smile was polite but cold, the kind of expression that suggested courtesy without warmth. "Miss Mitchell, I presume," William said, removing his hat with practiced grace. "I'm William Blackwood. I believe we haven't been properly introduced, though I was present at Sunday's unfortunate incident." Sarah recognized the name immediately. Joe Stevens had mentioned that William Blackwood owned half the businesses in Millbrook Creek and wielded considerable influence in local politics and church affairs. His presence at her door felt ominous rather than neighborly. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied cautiously, not inviting him inside. "What can I do for you?" "I thought it might be beneficial for us to have a conversation about your situation here in our community," he said, his tone suggesting that this was more of a command than a request. "May I come in?" Rex, who had been resting near Emma's makeshift crib, rose immediately when he heard William's voice. The German Shepherd positioned himself between Sarah and the doorway, his body language alert and protective. Something about the visitor clearly triggered the dog's instincts, though Sarah couldn't immediately identify what was causing Rex's concern. "I think we can talk just fine right here," Sarah said, stepping slightly backward into the apartment while keeping the door partially open. Rex's reaction to William was making her increasingly uncomfortable about the purpose of this visit. William's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened slightly at her refusal to grant him full access to her living space. "Very well," he said, though his tone suggested displeasure with her decision. "I'll be direct, Miss Mitchell. Your presence in Millbrook Creek has caused considerable disruption to our peaceful community." "I haven't done anything wrong," Sarah replied firmly. "The snake incident was as shocking to me as it was to everyone else." "Perhaps," William conceded, though his expression suggested he didn't believe her protestations of innocence. "However, the fact remains that nothing like this has ever happened in St. Matthew's Church during its 50-year history. Your arrival and this dangerous incident are not coincidental in the minds of many residents." Sarah felt her anger rising at the implied accusation. "Are you suggesting that I brought a venomous snake into church with my 6-month-old baby? What possible reason would I have for doing something so dangerous and insane?" "People have various motivations for their actions," William replied smoothly. "Perhaps you sought attention or sympathy, or a way to establish yourself in our community through dramatic means. Perhaps there are other factors you haven't shared with us." The suggestion was so outrageous that Sarah found herself momentarily speechless. Rex's low growling filled the silence, and the dog's intense focus on William became even more pronounced. "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah finally managed, "I came to Millbrook Creek because my car broke down. I attended church because I thought it might help me feel connected to the community. I had no ulterior motives, and I certainly didn't endanger my own child for attention." "Your car breakdown was certainly convenient," William observed, his tone carrying a subtle undertone of skepticism. "It provided you with a perfect excuse to remain in our town and integrate yourself into our community." "Convenient?" Sarah repeated, her voice rising slightly with indignation. "Having my car break down when I'm traveling with a baby and limited funds is hardly convenient, Mr. Blackwood." William raised a placating hand, though his gesture seemed more condescending than genuinely apologetic. "I don't mean to upset you, Miss Mitchell. I'm simply pointing out that your story has raised questions among concerned residents. People are worried about their safety and the safety of their children. Then they should be asking who really put that snake in my daughter's blanket," Sarah shot back, instead of blaming the victim of what was clearly a deliberate and dangerous act. "Ah," William said, his eyes lighting up with apparent interest. "So you do believe someone placed the snake there intentionally? That's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence to support such a claim?" Sarah realized she had walked into a rhetorical trap. If she insisted the snake had been planted deliberately, she would be making accusations against unknown members of the community without proof. If she suggested it might have been accidental, she would undermine her own defense against the community's suspicions. "I don't know how it got there," she said carefully, "but I know I didn't put it there." "Of course," William replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Miss Mitchell, I'm going to speak plainly. Many residents of Millbrook Creek believe it would be best for everyone involved if you continued your journey to wherever you were originally headed. The tension your presence has created is unhealthy for our community." The threat, though couched in polite language, was unmistakable. Sarah felt her heart racing as she realized the extent of the pressure being brought to bear against her. "And if I choose to stay?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "I would hope that wouldn't be necessary," William replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Millbrook Creek is a small town where everyone knows everyone else. Outsiders who bring trouble often find that life here becomes quite uncomfortable." Rex's growling intensified, and the dog took a step closer to the doorway. His protective instincts were clearly activated by something about William's presence or demeanor, though Sarah couldn't pinpoint exactly what was triggering the reaction. "Is that a threat, Mr. Blackwood?" Sarah asked directly. "Of course not," William replied smoothly. "I'm simply explaining the social dynamics of small-town life. People protect what they value, and they're naturally suspicious of disruptions to their peaceful existence. Someone putting a venomous snake near a baby is the disruption," Sarah pointed out, "not the people who were targeted by that dangerous act. If indeed that's what happened," William conceded. "However, until the truth is established, many residents prefer to err on the side of caution." After William left, Sarah found herself shaken by the encounter. The man's polite threats and veiled accusations had made it clear that her position in Millbrook Creek was becoming increasingly precarious. She was beginning to understand that William Blackwood wielded significant influence in the community and was apparently determined to drive her away. Rex remained agitated long after William's departure, pacing near the window and occasionally releasing small growls directed toward the street below. His behavior suggested that the visit had disturbed him as much as it had disturbed Sarah, though she couldn't understand why the dog had reacted so strongly to William specifically. That afternoon, while Emma napped and Sarah tried to process her increasingly difficult situation, Rex suddenly became alert and focused on something outside. His ears perked up, and he began pawing at the door with unmistakable urgency. "What is it, boy?" Sarah asked, recognizing the same behavior pattern that had preceded the discovery of the snake in church. Rex continued his insistent pawing, clearly wanting to investigate something outside. Sarah's curiosity overcame her caution, and she decided to take the dog for a walk to see what had captured his attention. The moment they stepped outside, Rex began pulling toward the church across the street. His behavior was purposeful and determined, reminiscent of his actions on Sunday morning. Sarah followed reluctantly, unsure what they might discover but trusting in Rex's protective instincts. Behind St. Matthew's Church, in a small garden area where flowers were planted each spring, Rex began digging frantically near a large decorative stone. His actions were urgent and focused, suggesting he had detected something important beneath the surface. "Rex, no!" Sarah whispered, concerned that his digging might be seen as vandalism by passing residents. But the dog ignored her commands, continuing to excavate with determination. Within minutes, Rex had uncovered something that made Sarah's blood run cold. Partially buried beneath the stone was a wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox, with small air holes drilled in its sides. The container was clearly designed to hold something alive, and given recent events, Sarah had a terrible suspicion about what that something might be. Rex's discovery suggested that the snake incident on Sunday had not been a random occurrence or a freak accident. Someone had prepared for it, planned it, and executed it with deliberate intent. The implications were terrifying, especially since it meant that whoever was responsible might be planning additional attacks. Sarah looked around nervously, suddenly aware that she and Rex were completely exposed in the church garden. If someone discovered them with the evidence of premeditation, it might be twisted to suggest that she had planted the box herself. The thought of being caught in such a compromising situation made her feel sick with anxiety, but Rex wasn't finished with his investigation. The German Shepherd continued sniffing around the garden area, his nose leading him toward the base of the church building itself, near a basement window that was partially concealed by overgrown bushes. He began showing the same intense interest that had led to the discovery of the buried box. Sarah approached the window cautiously, peering through the dusty glass into the church basement. What she saw made her gasp with shock and terror. Coiled in a large terrarium were at least 3 more snakes, their distinctive markings identifying them as copperheads, similar to the one that had threatened Emma on Sunday. The terrifying discovery confirmed Sarah's worst fears. Someone was deliberately collecting venomous snakes and using them as weapons of intimidation, or worse. The attack on Sunday had not been an isolated incident, but part of a larger, more sinister plan. Sarah's discovery of the snake terrarium in the church basement changed everything. The evidence was undeniable proof that someone in Millbrook Creek was deliberately collecting venomous serpents for malicious purposes. Her hands trembled as she used her phone to take photographs of the terrarium, knowing that she would need proof of what she had found. Rex remained on high alert throughout their investigation, his body language suggesting that danger was still present. The German Shepherd's protective instincts had once again proven invaluable, leading them to crucial evidence that might otherwise have remained hidden until it was too late. Sarah knew she needed to contact Sheriff Martinez immediately, but first she wanted to understand more about why she had become a target. The elaborate nature of the snake plot suggested motivations that went far beyond simple xenophobia towards strangers. Someone had invested significant time and effort into this scheme, which meant there had to be deeper reasons for wanting to drive her away from Millbrook Creek. That evening, Sarah decided to visit Estelle Crawford, the elderly librarian who had lived in Millbrook Creek for over 70 years. If anyone knew the town's secrets and hidden histories, it would be Estelle. Sarah hoped that understanding the community's past might provide insight into the present dangers she was facing. Estelle welcomed Sarah into her small cottage with genuine warmth, expressing concern about the difficulties she had been experiencing since Sunday's incident. The elderly woman's kindness was a refreshing contrast to the suspicion and hostility Sarah had encountered from most other residents. "My dear," Estelle said as she poured tea in her cozy living room, "I've been worried about you since I heard about that dreadful snake business. It's not like our community to be so unwelcoming to someone in need." "Mrs. Crawford," Sarah began carefully, "I've discovered some things that suggest the snake incident wasn't accidental. I think someone is deliberately trying to frighten me away from Millbrook Creek, but I don't understand why." Estelle's expression grew serious as she set down her teacup. "What kind of things have you discovered?" Sarah described Rex's findings, including the buried box and the terrarium full of snakes in the church basement. She watched as Estelle's face grew increasingly troubled with each detail. "Oh my," Estelle whispered when Sarah finished her account. "This is much worse than I feared. You need to understand something about our town's history, dear. There are old wounds here that have never properly healed." "What kind of old wounds?" Sarah asked, sensing that she was finally going to learn something crucial about her situation. Estelle took a deep breath before continuing. 40 years ago, there was a terrible scandal involving the Mitchell family. They owned a large tract of land that included what is now the center of town, including the church property and most of the commercial district. Sarah felt a chill at the mention of her surname. "Mitchell is my maiden name," she said quietly. "Are you suggesting there's a connection?" "The Mitchell family was forced to sell their land under very suspicious circumstances," Estelle continued. "There were accusations of fraud, intimidation, and even the use of venomous snakes to frighten family members into abandoning their property claims. The Blackwood family was instrumental in acquiring the Mitchell land at far below its actual value. The pieces were beginning to fall into place in Sarah's mind. "Are you saying that William Blackwood's family stole land from my family?" "I'm saying that the methods used to force the Mitchells out of Millbrook Creek were never properly investigated, and the beneficiaries of that forced sale have prospered enormously in the decades since Estelle replied diplomatically. "Your presence here, carrying the Mitchell name and staying in town for several days, may have awakened old fears about property claims being challenged." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the implications of what she was learning. "But I didn't even know about any family connection to this town. I'm just here because my car broke down." "William Blackwood might not believe that," Estelle said gently. "He spent his entire adult life building his fortune on the foundation of that original land acquisition. The possibility that a Mitchell descendant might return to investigate old injustices would be his worst nightmare. So he's trying to drive me away using the same methods his family used 40 years ago," Sarah concluded, feeling sick at the thought. "It would appear so," Estelle confirmed. "The question now is what you're going to do with this information." Before Sarah could respond, Rex began growling and pacing near Estelle's front window. The dog's behavior was becoming increasingly agitated, suggesting that something outside was causing concern. "What is it, boy?" Sarah asked, moving to peer through the curtains. What she saw in the street made her heart race with terror. William Blackwood's black Cadillac was parked across from Estelle's cottage, and the man himself was standing beside the vehicle, speaking intently with two other men Sarah didn't recognize. One of them was carrying what appeared to be a large cloth bag, and all three were looking directly toward Estelle's house. "He knows we're discussing the family history," Estelle said grimly, having joined Sarah at the window. "William has always been paranoid about people uncovering the truth about how his family acquired their wealth." Rex's agitation increased dramatically, and he began pawing urgently at the front door. His behavior suggested that immediate danger was approaching, and Sarah had learned to trust the dog's instincts completely. "We need to call Sheriff Martinez," Sarah said, reaching for her phone. The phone lines to this house were cut an hour ago," Estelle revealed calmly. "I discovered it when I tried to call my niece. William is covering all his bases to prevent you from getting help." The realization that they were trapped sent panic through Sarah's system. She was responsible not only for her own safety and Emma's, but now for Estelle's as well. The elderly woman had become a target simply by providing information about the town's hidden history. Rex's behavior reached a crescendo of urgency as he scratched frantically at the door. Through the window, Sarah could see the three men approaching the cottage, moving with purposeful determination. The man with the bag was being particularly careful with his burden, suggesting that it contained something dangerous and alive. "Is there a back exit?" Sarah asked quickly. "Through the kitchen," Estelle replied. moving with surprising agility for her age. Doom, but where can we go? William owns most of the businesses in town, and many residents are either afraid of him or financially dependent on him. Sarah made a quick decision. We're going to the church. It's public property, and there might be people there who can help us. They slipped out through Estelle's back door, just as the front door rattled with the sound of someone trying to force entry. Rex led the way through the darkness, his keen senses guiding them safely between houses and avoiding the streetlights where they might be spotted. The short journey to St. Matthew's Church felt like miles as they moved carefully through shadows and alleys. Sarah carried Emma, who had awakened during their hasty departure but remained remarkably quiet, as if sensing the danger surrounding them. When they reached the church, Sarah was relieved to see lights in Father Thomas's office and several cars in the parking lot, suggesting that an evening meeting or activity was taking place. They hurried toward the main entrance, hoping to find safety among other members of the community. But as they approached the church steps, Rex suddenly planted himself firmly in their path, refusing to allow them to proceed. The dog's stance and expression made it clear that he sensed danger ahead, despite the appearance of safety represented by the lighted building. "What's wrong, Rex?" Sarah whispered, though she was beginning to understand that the dog's warnings had saved them repeatedly over the past few days. Her question was answered when they heard voices coming from inside the church. Through the slightly open main doors, they could clearly hear William Blackwood's distinctive voice addressing what sounded like a small gathering. "The Mitchell woman has been asking questions about old property transfers," William was saying. "She's been meeting with people who know too much about past events that should remain buried. We need to take decisive action before she causes real problems for our community." Sarah felt cold dread wash over her as she realized that William was holding some kind of meeting about her presence in Millbrook Creek. Rex had once again saved them from walking directly into danger, detecting that the apparent sanctuary of the church had been compromised. The sound of agreement from multiple voices inside the church made it clear that William had allies in his campaign against her. Sarah began to understand that her situation was even more precarious than she had realized, and that the forces arrayed against her included more than just one powerful man with guilty secrets to protect. As they crouched in the shadows outside the church, trying to determine their next move, Rex suddenly became alert to a new threat. The dog's attention focused on the area behind the church where they had discovered the snake terrarium, and his low growling suggested that someone was moving around in that location. The pieces of William's plan were falling into place with terrifying clarity. While he kept potential witnesses distracted with his meeting inside the church, his accomplices were preparing another snake attack, probably targeting the cottage where they believed Sarah was still meeting with Estelle Crawford. Rex's warning about activity behind the church proved to be prophetic. As Sarah, Estelle, and baby Emma remained hidden in the shadows, they watched two figures emerge from the basement entrance, carrying equipment that was clearly intended for another snake attack. The men moved with practiced efficiency, suggesting this was not their first time executing such a plan. Sarah realized that she had to act quickly to prevent another innocent person from being endangered by William's escalating campaign of intimidation. Her phone finally had signal, and she immediately called Sheriff Martinez, whispering urgently into the device. "Sheriff, this is Sarah Mitchell. I'm at St. Matthew's Church with evidence that William Blackwood is behind the snake attacks. He's planning another one tonight, and there are witnesses inside the church who need to hear the truth about what's been happening." "Stay where you are," Sheriff Martinez replied immediately. "I'm 5 minutes away, and I'm bringing backup." But 5 minutes felt like an eternity when Rex suddenly stiffened with alarm. The German Shepherd's acute hearing had detected something that made him bare his teeth in protective warning. Through the church's open doors, they could hear footsteps approaching their hiding spot. "Find them," William Blackwood's voice commanded from inside the building. "They can't have gone far, and we can't afford to let the Mitchell woman spread her lies throughout the community." Sarah realized that their presence outside the church had been discovered. With limited options and Rex's protective instincts fully activated, she made a desperate decision. Standing up from their hiding place, she walked boldly through the main entrance of St. Matthew's Church, carrying Emma and followed by Estelle and Rex. The gathering inside fell silent as Sarah appeared in the doorway. About 15 members of the congregation were present, their faces showing various degrees of surprise, guilt, and confusion. William Blackwood stood at the front of the group, his expression shifting rapidly from shock to anger as he realized his plans had been overheard. "Eldine, members of this congregation," Sarah announced in a clear, strong voice that carried throughout the sanctuary, "you need to know that William Blackwood has been using venomous snakes to terrorize people, just as his family did 40 years ago when they stole the Mitchell family land." A gasp rippled through the small gathering as the implications of her statement sank in. Margaret Patterson, who was among those present, looked genuinely shocked by the accusation. "That's a complete fabrication," William declared, his voice betraying his anger despite his attempt to maintain composure. "This woman is clearly unstable and has been making wild accusations since she arrived in our town. Then how do you explain the terrarium full of copperheads in the church basement?" Sarah challenged, holding up her phone to display the photographs she had taken. "Or the wooden box that was buried in the church garden, designed to transport snakes for your attacks." Rex positioned himself protectively in front of Sarah and Emma, his stance making it clear that he would defend them against any threat. The dog's presence served as a powerful reminder of how he had saved the baby from the first snake attack, lending credibility to Sarah's accusations. Father Thomas, who had been present for the meeting but clearly uncomfortable with its direction, stepped forward. "William, is there truth to these accusations? Have you been using my church as a staging ground for attacks against this young woman and her child?" "Don't be ridiculous, Thomas," William replied, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Why would I need to attack some random stranger who means nothing to our community?" "Because she's not a random stranger," Estelle Crawford interjected, moving to stand beside Sarah. "She's a Mitchell, and her family's rightful claim to this land represents everything you've built your fortune on. You've been afraid that someone would eventually return to investigate how your family acquired their wealth." The revelation sent shockwaves through the gathered congregation. Several people began whispering among themselves, clearly remembering stories they had heard about the Mitchell family's forced departure from Millbrook Creek decades earlier. Dorothy Crane, who had been one of Sarah's harshest critics since Sunday's incident, looked genuinely troubled by what she was learning. "William, my late husband used to tell stories about irregularities in those old property transfers. He said there were always questions about how the Blackwood family managed to acquire so much land so quickly." "Ancient history," William insisted, but his composure was clearly cracking under the weight of multiple accusations and the scrutiny of people he had considered allies. At that moment, Rex's attention shifted toward the church's side entrance. The dog's alert posture indicated that someone was approaching, and his reaction suggested it was someone he recognized as either friend or legitimate authority. Sheriff Martinez entered the sanctuary accompanied by 2 deputies, their presence immediately changing the dynamics of the confrontation. The sheriff's eyes took in the scene quickly, noting the defensive positioning of the various participants and the obvious tension in the room. "Mr. Blackwood," Sheriff Martinez announced formally, "I have a warrant to search the church premises for evidence related to the illegal possession and transportation of venomous wildlife. I also need to speak with you about allegations of harassment and intimidation." William's face went pale as he realized that his carefully constructed facade was finally crumbling. "This is all a misunderstanding, Sheriff. I'm simply trying to protect our community from a potentially dangerous outsider. The only dangerous person here is you." Margaret Patterson declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been respected in the community for decades. "And if what this young woman says is true, then you've been terrorizing an innocent mother and baby for your own selfish purposes." Rex's behavior throughout the confrontation had been remarkable. The German Shepherd remained protective but controlled, demonstrating the training and intelligence that had made him such an effective guardian. His presence served as a constant reminder of how he had saved Emma from the first snake attack and detected subsequent threats. Sheriff Martinez's search of the church basement quickly uncovered the evidence Sarah had photographed, confirming her accusations about the deliberate collection and preparation of venomous snakes for attacks. Additional searches revealed documentation that connected William to the men who had been carrying out his orders. As the evening progressed, more members of the community arrived at the church, drawn by news of the dramatic revelations taking place in their sanctuary. The crowd that gathered to hear the truth was significantly larger than the small group that had initially supported William's campaign against Sarah. Father Thomas, deeply troubled by the discovery that his church had been used for such malicious purposes, addressed the assembled congregation with obvious emotion. "Our sanctuary has been violated by deception and hatred. We owe Miss Mitchell and her daughter not only our apologies, but our active support in helping her find justice for both past and present wrongs." The tide of community opinion shifted dramatically as people began to understand the true nature of what had been happening. Sarah found herself surrounded by residents who offered genuine apologies for their earlier suspicions and practical assistance with her situation. Joe Stevens, who had provided Sarah with shelter since her arrival, stepped forward to offer his testimony about her character and behavior during her stay in Millbrook Creek. "I've had the chance to observe Miss Mitchell closely for the past week, and I can testify that she's a devoted mother who has never done anything to endanger her child or anyone else." As William Blackwood was taken into custody, along with his accomplices, the full scope of his scheme became clear. The investigation revealed that he had been monitoring Sarah's presence in town from the moment her car broke down, becoming increasingly paranoid as he learned her surname and feared that she might have knowledge of her family's historical connection to Millbrook Creek. Over the following weeks, as the legal proceedings unfolded, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Rather than continuing her journey to an unknown destination, she chose to remain in Millbrook Creek and pursue the restoration of her family's property rights. The community that had initially viewed her with suspicion rallied around her cause, recognizing that justice for the Mitchell family was long overdue. The investigation into William's crimes also uncovered evidence of the historical fraud that had driven her family away 4 decades earlier. Rex, the hero whose protective instincts and keen senses had prevented tragedy and uncovered truth, became something of a local celebrity. The German Shepherd's intelligence and loyalty had not only saved Emma from multiple snake attacks, but had also led to the discovery of evidence that brought justice to light. Father Thomas instituted a special blessing for Rex during the following Sunday's service, acknowledging the dog's role in protecting the innocent and revealing the truth. The gesture symbolized the community's recognition that heroism comes in many forms, and that loyalty and courage deserve celebration regardless of their source. Sarah's decision to stay in Millbrook Creek transformed not only her own life, but the entire community's understanding of their history and values. The legal resolution of her family's historical property claims provided her with the financial foundation she needed to build a stable life for Emma. As autumn arrived in Millbrook Creek, Sarah had established herself not just as a resident, but as a valued member of the community. Her story had become a powerful reminder that truth has a way of emerging despite efforts to suppress it, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still be achieved. Rex continued to serve as Emma's faithful guardian, his watchful presence a constant reminder of how protective love can overcome even the most dangerous threats. The German Shepherd's remarkable intelligence and unwavering loyalty had not only saved lives, but had also helped heal a community's wounds and restore faith in the power of truth and justice. The small town of Millbrook Creek, Georgia, had learned valuable lessons about the importance of welcoming strangers, questioning authority, and standing up for what is right. Sarah Mitchell's arrival had initially seemed like a disruption to their peaceful existence, but it ultimately proved to be the catalyst for healing old wounds and building a stronger, more just community. Dear listeners, we hope that Sarah and Rex's incredible story has moved and inspired you. This tale of courage, loyalty, and the triumph of truth over deception reminds us that heroes come in all forms, sometimes even with 4 legs and unwavering devotion. To continue this emotional journey with us, we've prepared a special playlist filled with equally captivating stories that explore the depths of human resilience and the bonds that unite us. You can find this carefully curated collection by clicking to your left. If Sarah and Rex's story touched your heart, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that delve into life's complexities, celebrating the extraordinary moments that define our shared humanity. We eagerly await your thoughts and reactions in the comment section below. What did you think of Rex's heroic instincts? Have you ever experienced the protective loyalty of a faithful companion? Share your own stories with our community, and let's continue exploring these powerful tales of courage, justice, and redemption together. Until our next story, keep believing in the power of truth and the strength that comes from standing up for what's right.